Hi guys, this is Miss Co with a lesson video for 4B1. This is the second part of that video lesson. And in this part, we're going to learn how to factor out the GCF, The first lesson we were learning to find the GCF, and we now are going to look at factoring out the GCF. Factoring out the GCF is a lot like dividing out the GCF. And I've got a list of steps for you to do, but I want you guys to really try to get the conceptual understanding here, okay? So whenever we factor out the GCF, one of the ways that we can organize our work is to make a box with one row and the same number of boxes that we have terms. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to take those terms from our problem. We're going to put them inside the box. On our last unit 3, we saw that we had multiplication problems that looked like this, okay? And we would multiply this term times these guys, right? Or we would do it with the box method. And now we're going to go backward. All right, we're going to go backward. Let's see what that looks like. So when we were multiplying, we put the terms outside. Now we're going to put those terms inside when we're factoring. So when we're factoring and we're using the box method, we always put terms from our problem inside our box, inside the box. And that's really important to remember, okay? When we're multiplying, the terms go on the outside. When we're factoring, they go on the inside. So we'll go ahead and we'll finish putting those terms on the inside of the box. Remember that the sign to the left of the term stays with the term. So even our 8x squared term has an invisible positive there, okay? Out in front of that box, we know we're going to put the GCF there, okay? So we've made the box and we've put the terms from our expression inside the box. Now we need to find the GCF. And when we're talking about finding the GCF, we're talking about finding the GCF for each term. So this first term, we would look for those factors of the number part. And then, of course, the factors of our variable part. Here we've got 1 and 4, 2 and 2, and then an x. But on this last one, all we've got is that 1 and the 2. And do we have any x's? No, we don't. So we don't even have a variable part here. And I want you to notice that. We're always talking about the short list. This guy has no variables. That means our GCF cannot have any variables because everybody's got to have the same thing. And in terms of that number part, the best we can do is the 2 here, right? Because this is our short list, okay? Everybody does have a 2, so we're good. All right, when we're factoring out the GCF, we'll put that GCF in front of our boxes. And now what we need to do is divide out the GCF. So factoring out the GCF is to find that GCF and then divide it out of each term. So if we were to take a 2 out of this first term, it would, remember when we were looking at our factor pairs, that's what our factor pairs look like. So we took the 2 out, and so the 4 is left over. But because our GCF doesn't have any x's, we still have both the x times the x. And so when we take the 2 out, we still have 4x squared left, okay? Another way to do this, and this is the way that we're going to do this going forward, is we're going to ask ourselves, what do we need to multiply the 2 by to give us negative 4x? Because really that's going to give us that same term, okay? Of course, we're multiplying by needs to be negative, and we know that we'll bring that negative up, right? And we need to multiply 2 by 2 to get to 4. We don't have any x's, so we'll need an x. Here, though, on that third term, we're already at 2. Here's where we talked about a placeholder. Here's the one time where we'll use those ones, okay? So now what we're going to do, we're going to check to see where we're at. We found the GCF, we put it in the front, we divided out the GCF from each term, and we chose to do it this way, which is to figure out what we needed to multiply that GCF by to get each term in each of those spots in our box. And then for our answer, we're going to write the GCF in front of our parentheses, okay? And the terms from the top go inside the parentheses. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like, all right? One sec, guys. Let me get back there. When we write that answer, we're going to want to take this GCF term, right? And it'll come down right here in front, all right? And then we're going to have a set of parentheses. And those terms that were left over when we factored out the GCF, those are going to go inside the parentheses. So 4x squared minus 2x plus 1. I want you guys to be so careful when you're doing these kinds of problems, because dropping a negative or a sign, that's where you're going to get in trouble. Okay, so there's our answer. It looks like a multiplication problem, and that's how it should look. All right, factor out the GCF. That was example 3. Let's go ahead and try example number 4. All right, so we've got 3 terms. I've already made a box with 3 spots. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to put our terms right inside that box that we made, all right? And out in front of our box, that's where we know we'll put that GCF once we find it. And at this point, I want you guys to really start trying to look for the GCF without having to make a list. Now, you can always go back to making a list if you want, but remember, we're always going to look at that number part of our terms. And then, of course, we also have to consider the variable part. And what makes it easy to identify our GCF is to really, like we talked about, look at our short list. So the number part short list, if it's with our 3 here, okay, everybody else also has a 3, so we know our GCF has to be a 3. This last term does not have any variables. And so look at that. 3 has to be our GCF. Now, again, if you would like to make a list, go for it. All right. And then, of course, when we divide it out, we'll have an x squared left. And we're always going to check x squared times 3. Yep, it equals 3x squared. This multiplied by our GCF should equal what's in that spot right underneath. Here, we're going to bring that negative up. In order for us to get that 12x, we're going to need to multiply the 3 by the 4 and the x, the negative 4 and the x. So negative 4x times 3, yep, negative 12x. This last spot, we're going to need to bring our plus up. And then we're going to need a 2 times 3 to get to that plus 6. And of course, that last step, we're going to take those terms. That 3 will come right down in front. And then we'll pop these terms right off the top. They'll go inside our parentheses. X squared minus 4x plus 2. All right. When we factor out the GCF. Okay, our GCF, right, it's always going to go out there in front. Don't forget that. All right, last example on this part. Number 5. And on number 5, we've got some terms that definitely we've got a lot of variables that we're working with. So we'll go ahead and put each term in its own spot inside of our box, okay? And remember, out in front of the box, that's where the GCF will go, okay? We don't know what it is yet, okay? But we do want to put each of those terms in its own spot inside the box. So that first box we'll take this first term, second term, third term, we'll just pop them right in, okay? Here's that first term, x cubed y squared. And that second term, 9x y cubed. And finally, 6x squared y squared. Now, again, we're going to look at the number part first. Look at that. No coefficient on this first term. Of course, we always have an invisible 1. We want to do something better than the 1. So let's take a look at our variable part. Who's got the lowest exponent on our x's? Well, we only have this invisible exponent of 1 here. And so for our GCF, we know we'll only have an x to the 1, or just that one x right there. And in terms of our y's, both of these guys are y squared. This is y cubed, so we know the y part has to be y squared, because that's the lowest number of y's. Y times y here, y times y there. This is our GCF, guys. And of course, since this guy's an invisible 1, we'll have an invisible 1 here. It's important to remember that when we are dividing out, we're subtracting our exponents, okay? So when I'm dividing out an x, it'll be that 3 minus the invisible 1. And that means up here, I'll have that x squared. We already have y squared, so that's all I'm going to need up here. Our plus comes up. We're going to have to multiply our invisible 1 by 9. We already have x to the 1, but we are going to need to multiply by y to get us from y squared to this y cubed. Oops, okay. All right, for that last spot, we've got plus 6x squared y squared. 6x squared y squared. So we're going to need to multiply that invisible 1 by a 6. Of course, we'll bring this plus up. And here we've only got one, like that x to the invisible 1, right? So we're going to need to multiply by another x to get us to this x squared. We already have y squared, so we're good there. And it's always important that you check, does x squared times this term equal this term, right? X squared times xy squared. Well, we're going to take those x's, add the 2 to this invisible 1. We'll get that x cubed. And then, of course, we have that y squared too. So as you go through and you factor out the GCF, make sure you always check, okay? For your answer, you're going to take that GCF. It'll go out right in front of your answer, xy squared. Then we'll have a set of parentheses, and in that set of parentheses, we'll take the terms on the top. Guys, as a reminder, in between each term should be an add or a subtract. So for all of our polynomials, each term is always separated by an add or subtract. That GCF out front is multiplying this whole term, right? Remember, factoring is like the opposite of multiply. It's a lot like divide. All right, guys, that's the end of your 4B1 video lesson. And thanks for watching.